That's got nothing to do with that. I mean, we've got to get down to the basis after.
I agree.
You know, I reckon we'll settle in the AFL within 10 years. Okay, so go to you, John, when you're ready. John, do you think that possibly when we're looking at the AFL final series now and we've seen Collingwood out of it already, do you believe that with only 2 double chances in the AFL now and 15 teams in the competition, do you think that's the way to go from here on in after 1992?
I think after the last few years of national competition, it's sorted out quite a bit, and okay, we know that the Bears are struggling and Sydney are struggling, but with West Coast and Adelaide getting stronger and stronger, and quite a few Melbourne clubs struggling, I think it's important that the commissioners don't give Western Australia and South Australia too many advantages. They should be playing the same number of home games at home. If Melbourne clubs play 9 on their home ground, they should play 9, and they shouldn't take into consideration other money considerations.
I certainly agree on that one. I can't see why some clubs get 7 home games and they play the others at VFL Park or wherever. Every club should get the same number of home games.
I'd favour that. I think there's no reason why any club should be advantaged or disadvantaged by the competition as it stands, and I'd like to see that happen, certainly.
Right, now we come back to a contentious issue. Do you need more players on the bench at finals time when you look at the overall complexity of a football club raising $5 to $5 or $6 million and you lose 1 or 2 players, as Collingwood did yesterday, in an elimination final, and all of a sudden you've got 20 players versus 18 for the next 100 minutes, and it's a knockout final. Do we need 1, maybe 2, or leave it as it is?
I've always been open-minded about it, and I've always felt we should stay as we are, but certainly I think they should consider an extra one at some stage, but I really don't think. I think the pace of the game and the wear and tear, more Achilles and these type, more knees, more of those types of injuries, I believe that they should be bringing in probably an extra reserve to make it 21.
I've always been hard and fast that we should leave it as it is, but I'm convinced now that that's not enough. I don't care about finals. Even home and home games, I'd probably go as far as having an extra 2, and certainly in the finals an extra 2. And I was hard and fast that we should leave it as it was.
A lot of people want the game to stay as is because they've been comfortable with it, but for me, they've got to have 4. And the sooner the better. And I don't think they have it just for the finals. I think they've got to run it through the whole year. Otherwise, your whole coaching strategies have just got to be changed for finals.
And then under 18s is in. And is the gap fair enough, or it's not? Now, you're working with kids doing their HSC, right? The way the zones were set up, that kids from Ringwood had to travel all the way over to Essendon in the year of the HSC. Now they only have to train in Ringwood or down in the southern or out in the western or northern or whatever. But that's a plus. The taxi fares for clubs in the west, Footscray, North Melbourne and Essendon were $30,000.
Okay. How many times have you been to a football game? Hold on, boys.
Apple can hit as well. Yeah. It's not big, it's just in the road.
Okay. How many times have you been to a game of football, watched 120 minutes and walked away still not knowing what went on? This is commentary. Kevin Sheedy, you sit in the coach's box, you dictate the play, but so many people don't understand what exactly goes on.
Well, that's right, Ed. I mean, for many years we've looked at the situation. People have come and spoken to me after playing at Richmond or naturally coaching Essendon and said, we played well today, but I just wasn't actually sure what was going on out on the deck. And from that point of view, Fostco is really a company that's preparing a group of people to give a good explanation and a communication to the corporate boxes here at the MCG of really what the strategies of the game are. And I think that what's going to happen in the next decade, and particularly after 1992, we're going to have a situation really where after drafting, the salary cap, the West Coast Eagles, the Adelaide Crows, are all in, they're all firing, and you know, they've got the best out of Western Australia, they've got the best out of Adelaide, and you have a look at the Melbourne-based clubs with 11 clubs, and they raise probably $50 million. And where are the Victorian-based Melbourne clubs going to be by the middle of 1990, say 1995? And to me, it's going to be about strategy and how you're going to be able to control the game from the coaching boxes and play a different type of football. And I think that Fostco's about getting in early, explaining to the corporate boxes. We've got 130 here at the MCG. I believe that when you really look at it, a lot of the company executives aren't always from Melbourne, don't always know everything about Australian football. They could be from overseas, they could be from New Zealand, Sydney, Queensland, whatever. And I think that not only from the strategy point of view, but also from the basics of the game, if we can give a proper and a technical explanation of the game for their guests as well as the corporate executive of the company themselves, we believe that we're on the right track of making great inroads into the game and the proper development of the game in general. I think that 1990, I think that's what football's going to be pretty exciting. It's going to be very close. Goal, 2, maybe 3 in it, all the way through the seasons. 1970s, I was working in the schools, teaching football and the techniques of the game. And I think that probably after 20 years of where I believe after the experiences that I've gained, I really honestly believe that we're going the right way to now communicate to the top people of Melbourne what's happening out on that football field.
Super boxes cost an awful lot. You know that. You pay out the money every year. The key thing is to get the most out of it, and that doesn't just mean having a quiet afternoon of the football, but actually taking something away. And that's what Fostco is really harbouring, isn't it, Kevin? The fact that people can come to the game and go back afterwards, talk about it, and know a little bit extra about what's going on.
Well, I think it's going to be very important. I mean, in our situation, we've got a tremendous amount of people that put a lot of money into the game, and we know that and realise that the expenditure that goes into the super boxes, whether it be by A, buying the box, B, supporting the people when they come along, they wine and dine, but it's also important for the game of football to really send those people home with a proper knowledge of the game. And that to me is what Fostco's about, quality education of football.
And Kevin, you've had first-hand experience in the effects that this type of commitment that you're going to provide and the Fostco people are going to provide can do to a corporate box through some of the talks you've given?
Well, I've had a number of experiences my own self in going to the boxes over the last year or two and sitting down and explaining tactically what happens out on the field. These have been like state matches I've been to with some of the organisations, and they couldn't believe that to actually put the magnetic board in the box and explain to people what we could do and where the strategies are going to be on how maybe a coach, say like a Malcolm Blight, who's a full forward coach and a ruck rover coach, would coach against possibly a Kevin Sheedy or a Mickey Malthouse or a Terry Wheeler, who are probably defensive type coaches. When you go out there and you're trying to win a grand final or your first semi-final, in many situations a lot of teams are getting to the finals for the first time. And really when you look at it, the strategy and the technique of the game that happens there for 120 minutes, I mean 2 hours is over and done with very quickly. And I really believe that the quality explanation of the game to the people, I mean the people in the super boxes are running the best business houses in Australia, and they, I believe, deserve the best quality production from football.
The Fostco panel of experts have been there, they've seen it all, they've done it before, and they are experts in explaining the game of football to all levels of people, their understanding. Stand by now and have a look at just what goes on at Fostco football.
Very, very good.
Excellent.
We're prepared for that 96. I think it's going to be a good play.
It's always going to be quite surrounding, you know, high. We'll see good enough to pick him up fine.
But Heady was at least playing senior football. You can admit.
Not much. Bob, looking at your recruiting and your about the drafting setup of the AFL at the present time and where it's going.
Well, I think you know, the concept of a national draft is okay, but unfortunately at this stage, you know, we still haven't got national football. We've got what, 4 to 5 million people in New South Wales, and whatever there is in Queensland, which is never really going to be part of the national draft. Right now, there's more players coming out of Darwin than there are out of Queensland, and I do believe that with the age of the players that we're drafting now, there are going to be, I think, probably some tests in court of whether or not parents want a kid to go across to Perth, or even from Perth to Sydney, particularly if they're in the HSC era. It's a completely different ballgame.
Barry, in the situation, knowing the scholastical ages of kids and where they are about that 16 to 20 years of age, we seem to have a draft that's set up for America, but really the American gridiron clubs also have a college unit supporting their system, where here in Australia we don't have the college system supporting. How do you feel about that gap between 17 and 22?
I think if we're going to move in that direction, we have to have the universities there that are going to give that support that a lot of these kids at that age would like to have. We either do that, or we make the age under 20, something of that nature. It seems to me that it's too young at the present stage. I mean, I'm presently working with an under 16 development squad, and these kids really don't know enough about footy yet, and I don't think any of them want to leave home. They're not ready for it. And I think that we've got to look at that pretty seriously. I think we'd be tampering with a kid's life that maybe we're not doing the right thing by that particular young fellow.
John, you say therefore in this situation when Ron Barassi got the 10-year rule back in with North Melbourne, and 2 or 3 players went over and helped North Melbourne win the premiership, we don't see that anymore, and we're in a situation, as Barry's making a comment, where we're drafting 18-year-old kids at every 15th choice. How would you like to coach under that system?
Well, I wouldn't, but I would also relate it further back to when there was no zoning. There's metropolitan zoning. I'm talking about country zoning now in Australia. Where the 12 Victorian, in the old-fashioned days, the 12 VFL clubs, where if you were smart, and probably in the 50s and 60s, probably the best 2 clubs out were Richmond and Carlton, because you really had to know every player outside your metropolitan zone in Australia. And I think the ones that did it well, I mean, you probably unearthed a lot of 13 and 14 and 15 and 16-year-olds in the country that were showing promise. But now, under the drafting scheme, if you're going to draft a player from anywhere in Australia, or in Western Australia, or in Woodville or Central Districts, you've really got to know every player in Australia that's worth drafting. Otherwise you'll let some slip through that were good draftees or some potential draftees, and if you don't know enough about them, you let them go. But on the young kid side, I mean, I agree, there's nothing worse than trying to transfer a 15 or 16-year-old potential young player, taking him away from his family life, from the city or interstate. Interstate would be horrific to make them go interstate. It shouldn't be allowed. There should be some protection up to whatever age it is, 18, 19 or 20, but I think, as I said, to be able to draft an 18-year-old from Western Australia or vice versa, it shouldn't be allowed.
So what you really
There's got to be an age limit somewhere where they can't, the young ones I'm talking about. But as I said,
Well, they have raised it from 17 to 18.
Well, about to make that decision. They have not finalised that decision yet, and it's very important that we look at it, because we have so many areas of concern for a young player at a very you're developing them at a specific age here. A, education, B, job, and also sport. And many parents aren't really concerned with sport being the be-all, end-all at this time of their life.
You see, most parents recognise the fact that their young 21-year-old can walk out on the field, twist a knee, and that's the end of their career in football, whereas their academic background, or whatever they're going to pursue, is going to be something that'll be with them forever. So they've got to look after that first. If the two can work hand in hand, then you've got a different proposition.
We look at now, the AFL have made decisions to bring in the Victorian State Football League at reserve level, the old reserve level, and now also at under 18 level. You guys really think that the under 18s is a very good replacement for the previous under 19s in football at the moment?
At the moment, I think no, but we've probably got to give it a little bit of time just to see how it works. But I think it's just made the gap even further than it was before. At least with the under-19s, a kid could come up and be blooded in the reserves and then go back to the under-19s. You can't hand anybody experience. You can't give somebody a book and say this is experience. They've got to, you've got to earn experience, and a kid could come up out of the under-19s into the reserves, go back again, and vice versa. And I think now the gap is just getting too far.
If I look at a situation where you guys all started your football careers, could I ask how old you were when you played your first match for the VFL when you first started? John, how old were you?
17.
Bobby?
17.
Barry?
I was 17 too.
Oh, I'm sorry about that question, but look, it's so important because the standard of the VFL has now gone to the AFL, which is the best players in Australia, and the standard has lifted. I think that's one of the most important differential areas where we're looking at here, and players looking to come into the game, if they're not properly supervised and coached, they will lose their confidence. And confidence, how do you explain when you're talking to people in areas of football, the confidence of a young player when he may lose it or is ready to go to the next step?
Well, certainly it's certainly a fragile area where they have to be, sort of counselled, and certainly gets back to what deep down is inside them. Some of them are more fragile than others, and the old thing, some are introverts and some are extroverts, and some of those, introverted kids that are very shy and fragile may take a while to get out of it, whereas the outward ones that show plenty of bluff and bravado and that have probably been on the streetwise a bit younger than the others, and you were selling Heralds when you were 12 or 13, so probably you sort of knew all about it. But some of the young kids haven't had that streetwise cunning, and but the ones that are fragile have to be treated very carefully.
Bob?
Yeah, I couldn't but agree with that more. I was amazed last year when I was involved with the interstate reserve side, and so many of those kids were complete introverts. Maybe I grew up as a Port Melbourne boy. I grew up with a bit of arrogance or something, but that's out on the football field. But I couldn't believe how many of the kids today are real introverts, and you do have to teach them what football's all about.
Barry?
Seems to me, Kevin, that we're making a lot of assumptions here when we're talking about bringing these young people out of junior ranks straight into league football. We could have done it, say, 15 years ago when football was the be-all and end-all. I only played ever cricket and football. Occasionally I had a swim in the summer if it was hot, and that was about it. These days the kids have got a wide range of things that they do, and they're not as well educated in Australian rules as they used to be. It's my opinion, because I'm now coaching this young group of young, very talented kids who don't know very much about football. And in my opinion, the under-18s ought to be raised to maybe under 21, maybe under 20. I'm not sure, but it certainly needs to be raised.
John, we're looking at now the innovations coming over into the game, the white line. We're going back to now the centre square and the centre circle on the white line. And I'd like all of your opinions about, is a short ruckman out of football, or is he coming back in because of the mobility of the play and the state of play at the moment, where probably at the start of 1980s, we looked at the 6'8" player that could pull a mark down and hold the mark and take a position in play, compared to, we see players like Stoneham now being used in the ruck, a very mobile ruckman, and that's back to possibly when you were playing. And how do you see the change in A, the white line across the centre, B, should it be there, should it not be there, and will shorter ruckman come into football to change the game again back to what it was?
Well, I never ever agreed with the white line and the centre centre line coming in to start off with. There was a few isolated cases where ruckmen were wrestling, and there's from famous ones with Peter Moore and Gary Dempsey and some of these sort of ones. But I don't believe it should come in. I don't believe we should have it now, and I think that whether we've got the white line or across the centre or not, I'm sure that the 6'9" players will not have the advantage they had 3 or 4 years ago. And as you say, you're using Stoneham, but you're probably using one of the most mobile 6'3" blokes in the game. Certainly one of the best players in Australia. But certainly, if someone who's 6'3" can jump almost as much as someone who's 6'8" and have a lot more pluses apart from just jumping, yes, they're going to come back for sure. I mean, it's you've got to be mobile. 6'3", 6'4" that's mobile, they'll have a big advantage.
Barry?
The 6'8", look, so many of the ruckmen these days are so predictable anyway, so it doesn't make much difference. I don't think who touches the ball, unless they're like Stoneham, who can tap it, catch his own hit, and then hand pass it out, or take it out of the air and then give a hand pass out from there. It seems to me that the mobile ruckman is here to stay. The big, tall ruckman is only nuisance value, really.
Bobby?
Yeah, I've always been dead against that white line. I don't think anybody should be told where they've got to come from as far as, if you want to run backwards, if you want to run forwards, that's your choice. That's the way you play it and the way you play against your opponent. I think the only thing I agree with there is the centre square, because it was getting pretty hard to get the ball out of the centre with half the players on the ground out there. So at least that just dictates, where somebody starts from. But as far as the mobile ruckman is concerned, people have realised that there's more to it than just a centre bounce. There's all over the ground. There's what happens once it's finished, where they go, and they are mobile athletes. They're not just, not too many of those big 6'8" guys can cover the territory that we saw, like Barry Stoneham in the final against Footscray. Was just absolutely magnificent. One bounce out of the centre, he handled the ball 3 times before it left the centre square. There's not too many players with the ability to be able to do that anyway.
Probably looking at what's happened in football, you've all been coaches and you're all in the engine room at one stage of your life. I'd like to ask you the question, what your feelings about being in the